Venus and star blessings, everybody. I'm going to just give you guys some thoughts and pointers to consider about Saturn squaring the Sun. So there's a few things to think about, and some things I've already mentioned in a previous recording where I spoke about the ingression of Ceres in Sagittarius, Mars and the Sun, as being quite a prominent lineup, because the last time it occurred was in 1991. And that was a very important time, given it was the time of the Gulf War. And here we are, how many years later, in a similar situation. So the first thing that I want to highlight is that when you are looking at aspects between planets that are occurring in the heavens, such as this Saturn squaring the Sun, of course, it's also squaring Mars and the Sun and Ceres. So all those three bodies that have ingressed into Sagittarius are all in a relationship to Saturn, which is a square aspect. So a couple of things. The first thing is that it is a square aspect, so we need to understand what does that mean. We also need to understand the planets involved and the archetypes involved as well. And also the square aspect, well, where in the cycle is this square aspect occurring? In other words, when two planets are square each other, they're either in a first quarter square or a last quarter square. And the first quarter square has a very different description and manifestation to the last quarter square. And these are important components of any cycle to really understand when you are looking at two planets squaring each other, whether it's looking at transits or whether it's looking at your own chart, because first quarter square, last quarter square are not the same thing. In this case, what we are seeing is actually a last quarter square. And the reason for that is because the Sun and Mars and Ceres, for that matter, they are faster moving bodies than what Saturn is. So these three bodies here are going to essentially catch up to Saturn at some point and form a conjunction, which will be a new cycle that begins. So where this started actually was in a conjunction between, I'm just going to stick to the Sun and Saturn. That conjunction occurred in February of this year in the sign of Capricorn, because Saturn had Aquarius rather, Saturn had not gotten into Pisces yet. So the conjunction occurred virtually at the beginning of this year in Aquarius, right? So fast forward, Saturn has reached Pisces and the Sun has reached Sagittarius, so they are forming a square, and it is a last quarter square because the Sun is moving to catch up to Saturn. It's not the other way around, right? You always look to the faster moving planets to understand where they are in the cycle. So let me start by explaining what a last quarter square implies. And it is quite uncanny, of course, and very interesting that it really does reflect, at least from that collective perspective, in the Middle East, and the matters that are ongoing with that particular crisis and situation. So a last quarter square is basically, Dane Rudhyar coined the term crisis in consciousness. And it is a term that I think a lot of people probably don't understand what that means. And so another way of describing that caption would be to say crisis in thinking. What sort of thinking? We're talking about thinking related to our beliefs. So it's not just your everyday left brain Gemini mind where you're just thinking about whether you're hungry or whether you're tired. It's actually that the bigger concepts and beliefs and thoughts that you have about life, about God, about people, about anything that's bigger than just your everyday normal kind of routine. So there is a crisis here, in other words, in the collective thinking about the beliefs that people hold. So that's what the last quarter square speaks to in a nutshell. So that's one layer. Then we have the square aspect itself, which just the square aspect speaks to conflict. It's a dynamic energy. And it's also an aspect that produces change. The change ultimately does come through conflict. It doesn't come in a diplomatic manner. It doesn't come in a peaceful manner. It really does come through two forces not opposing each other. Opposing each other would be in opposition. So it's two very different positions trying to occupy the same space, and it's not possible. Hence the conflict that arises out of a square aspect. And ultimately, it can never be truly resolved. A square can never be truly resolved. So there's that layer into this. Then the other layer is the fact that Saturn is involved in this square aspect to the Sun, Mars, and Ceres. And earlier, it was also square Mercury, but Mercury moves quite quickly. So it's moved on. As you can see, it's 21 degrees now. Now, the nature of a square aspect is that of Saturn, literally. The energy, in other words, nature, energy, manifestation, description, whatever you want to call it, of a square aspect is the mirror image of the same energy that Saturn speaks to. So we've kind of got a, not kind of, we do. We have a double signature of tension here because the Saturn is squaring these planets, and a square aspect is the same energy as Saturn. So hence the intensity of this square aspect. So we've got a last quarter square, which is indicative of people collectively needing to address, I guess, look into their thought processes, their thoughts around their beliefs, right? It's a complete change and letting go of past beliefs, if I can put it like that. Last quarter square. Then we have, as I said, the square aspect itself, Saturn squaring those planets. The square aspect on its own denotes tension, conflict, dynamic energy, and change. And then we've got the planet Saturn involved, which is a planet that mirrors the energy of a square aspect. So there's layer upon layer upon layer speaking to tension and conflict and the need for change as well. And then we can bring in the archetypes, which are Sagittarius and Pisces. Both those signs are actually ruled by Jupiter. One is feminine, Pisces, and the other is masculine, Sagittarius. Now, the conflict between these two archetypes at the moment is the conflict of what, it depends how you look at it, because there is, from an evolutionary perspective at least, there are divisions of souls in a particular state of evolution or consciousness or awareness or knowing. And the way Jeffrey Wolfgrain describes that is consensus state, individuated state, and spiritualized state. And there are sub periods within those three primary states of consciousness as well. So it can get very complex, but just to keep it very simple, the consensus state really speaks to over 80% of the population on the earth plane. So it's the majority of people, right? The individuated state, which is a smaller portion of individuals on the planet, would most likely not be swayed by the present conflicts and tensions in a way that creates further conflict or division. They would bring to those situations more awareness, more consciousness, more compassion, more empathy, and more acceptance, and try to bring unity as opposed to further conflict, for instance. So the majority of people participating in the conflict, whether it's with their own mind or whether it's physically or otherwise, more likely to be from the consensus state, which is 80% of the population on the earth plane. So then what we're talking about is we are talking about conditioned beliefs. Beliefs is Sagittarius, and Pisces is our ideals. So there's a, pardon me, there's a clash, conflict, square, tension between beliefs and ideals. And there is a clear division of those in different groups of people coming from all sorts of positions, really, but there's a lot of self-righteousness going on, which is associated to Sagittarius. The fact that Jupiter is the ruler of both Pisces and Sagittarius and is in the sign of Taurus is also very interesting and not a coincidence, because Taurus, of course, is the archetype that corresponds to attachment, ownership, the land. And we all know primarily what this conflict is about. When you sort of remove the layers of ideologies and a religious point of view and right and wrong and so on and so forth, underneath all of that is a thing called land, which from the very basic level of Taurus, which is very unconscious, is that position of ownership. And as I've said numerous times, the truth is that no one owns the land, absolutely no one. That's such an illusion. So Jupiter is in a sign that corresponds to possession and land in particular. So Jupiter is emphasizing what the matters of this conflict is about, which is overshadowed or dressed by, colored by these things called beliefs, righteousness, and ideals. So when you think about all those layers, it's pretty, it's quite literal, isn't it, really? It's just so literal. Now, I find it interesting that in the last few days, there's been mention of some kind of agreement to put things to a pause for approximately 3 or 4 days for some negotiations and exchanges to take place. The last I heard was that there was a delay in that, and I've not heard anything further, so I'm not really sure what's going on. The one thing that does give hope, I think, is Venus in Libra. who is in her domicile position, approaching the South Node in Libra. However, having said that, well, first of all, let's just say Venus is extremely powerful because she's in her domicile position, number one. She's extremely powerful as a morning star goddess, which is the cycle she's in at the moment. She's rising on the eastern horizon every morning as a morning star, and will do so until next year, June, where she switches into her evening star phase. So at the moment, she's still the morning star. She's extremely dignified in the sign of Libra. She's catching up to the South Node, but remember, we recently had an eclipse, a solar eclipse, in the sign of Libra. And like I have also said on numerous occasions, it's not correct to automatically assume that planets in Libra will establish or just represent peace, immediately just represent peace. To the contrary, what they are likely to highlight is the opposite, is the conflict, which of course is Aries. And look at the North Node and Eris, the goddess Ceres, who's the goddess of discord, destruction, and chaos. A very slow-moving body, very slow, 500 and something years to go through the entire zodiac, something like that. She's been conjunct the North Node for quite some time now. So the shadow side to Libra is Aries. And so sometimes what we might see when planets ingress into Libra, such as the solar eclipse that took place, is the opposite gets amplified, if you like, which is the conflict, Aries. So even though she's in her domicile and very, very well placed and very dignified and very strong, it doesn't mean that she will just naturally and organically and naturally bring peace upon matters, because Libra is an archetype that speaks to the need to understand the diversity in all of life, in all of situations, in all human beings, from the point of view of beliefs, values, ethics, and so on and so forth. So first and foremost, we must understand the diversity that exists. Through that diversity, we explore further things about our own personal development, our own set of values and beliefs, and so on and so forth. And we find some kind of balance through the process of exploring the diversity by not creating conflict and not creating judgment, but by actually having some acceptance. So before we get to the point of peace and harmony, we must first have some capacity to understand and accept the diversity. And yes, find our position within that, but not in a way of holding a place from a self-righteous position, but rather understanding what our own position is, and at the same time having the equal acceptance for others and the position that they may hold as well. That's what ultimately we are trying to integrate and evolve through the archetype of Libra. So given that she is a morning star, Venus, and she most certainly has been very involved in the events that have been activated since early October. Not that that is a new situation. It has been going on for decades, but we are just merely speaking to the global awareness and the calling for change and acknowledgement to take place. So I think when Venus gets to the South Node, and then not long after that, she will reach, when she gets towards the end of Libra, she will also pass over the Libran Venus star point, which was born October 2022. So that Venus Libran star point that was born October 2022, it's the Scorpio star point essentially, which everyone has in their chart, and it transitioned into Libra last year in October. Now, a Venus star point spends approximately 100 years or more in one particular sign. So that transition is a collective transition. It does speak to our own personal life as well, for sure, but it most certainly speaks to collective changes and shifts. However, because it is such a slow moving phenomena, if you like, star point, being a star point, the changes obviously they will take time to emerge and develop and be cultivated and evolved towards. And so I think Venus's passage over the South Node and over the Venus star point could potentially be of help in relation to these matters going on in the Middle East from the point of view of the conflict and so forth. Is it going to be the thing that's going to create the ultimate resolution of ultimate peace? I wouldn't think so, but it might bring in a very important shift in some kind of way. So it could be the catalyst, in other words, for something bigger that will occur at some point, right? But in the interim, however, before we get to Venus catching up to the South Node and then catching up to 29 degrees of Libra, which is her passing over the Libran Venus star point, this current week, we are very much in the zone of this Saturn squaring these Sagittarius planets. So it obviously isn't an easy passage. However, I might say, though, that, and I did write a little post on this and some people have responded, when the sun transitioned from Scorpio to Sagittarius, I literally felt that shift of energy. That the sun in Scorpio, of course, with Mars in Scorpio, where we had the occultation, Sun-Mars conjunction, Ceres in Scorpio, which all opposed Uranus in Taurus and Jupiter in Taurus. This Scorpio season is undoubtedly going to be one of the most memorable Scorpio seasons of our entire life, I think. It certainly has been up to this point. And a very painful historical moment in time, if you like, for many, 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 many people. You know, again, it's not about sides, but it is about humanity. And it is about justice and equality and fairness distributed in an equal manner. Libra operating at a more evolved level. But first, as I said before, we must go through the process of understanding the diversity that exists and being more accepting of it, instead of wanting to impose our will, Aries, onto a particular group or whatever it may be, and wanting to annihilate that group in order to feel secure and confident in our position, because that's what happens essentially. In order for, and truth corresponds to Sagittarius, there is something called natural truth, if you like, and then there is personal truth and truth based on our own prejudice and biased positions. The ultimate truth is actually very easily identified in nature and in the source, creation to all things. Diversity, which is Libra, is something that we must understand, accommodate, accept, and find a way to be in peace with it as a Libra, as opposed to being in conflict with it, Aries. See, in order for someone's belief, Sagittarius, to feel validated, and for a group or an individual to feel that their belief is the belief, the one, then the position that, and this is all from a consensus state level, which implies heavy conditioning. Conditioning, by the way, corresponds to Saturn. In order for us to maintain our position, our belief, for that to be correct, we have to make the others wrong. That's the only way we can feel secure in our belief system. That is coming from a consensus state level, which is more than 80% of people on the planet. So I guess, and the other thing, of course, with Ceres in Sagittarius, which I have already spoken to in a video that I uploaded a few days ago called Ceres in Sagittarius, conjunct the Sun and Mars, and the last time this alignment occurred was in 1991. So I have spoken to that, but today I'm specifically speaking to Saturn squaring these planets. And so Ceres, again, is the Earth Mother goddess. Her other name is Demeter in Greek. Is a very, I would say, is one of the more difficult archetypes, feminine deities, asteroid goddesses in the chart, because unfortunately, when she is activated, she will bring through some type of loss and grief, whether it's on individual level or whether it is on a collective level. And I can assure you that I have seen that over and over again through many, many years, including in my own life. Ceres is a very powerful goddess. So, of course, in Sagittarius, it is speaking to, again, people's beliefs and religion, of course. So there's clearly a great conflict and tension between people's beliefs and the ideal. And my ideal is that one religion is correct, or one way is correct, and all else is wrong. And that is one of the most unconscious states that any human being can actually hold within themselves. It is literally the most unconscious position to hold. I found this quote today, and I just wanted to show it to you. Let me just find it. It kind of encapsulates a lot of what I've just said, but nails it in just a few words. So the quote is, "We are supposed to become undivided inside ourselves. we are supposed to become undivided inside ourselves. That is such a powerful statement, and there is so much truth in those words, because the opposite to that is reflecting the conflict on the earth plane, because the conflict on the earth plane, amongst many other things, is primarily based on this division. The division pointing to matters around ownership or matters around belief systems. So there is a division because people hold the stance that this path is correct, this path is right, this belief is correct, therefore all those other ones there are wrong. So let's cast them into hell, so to speak, right? Again, as I said, this is such an unconscious state to hold in your own position. It really is. So I love that statement. We are supposed to become undivided inside ourselves, because if we can reach a position within ourselves where we are undivided, we will not project this division externally onto this reality. And that's the possibility of when peace on earth can be cultivated, when we ourselves become undivided. There's so much wisdom in that statement. I just can't emphasize that enough. The other thing that I wanted to also share, and I think I have mentioned this at some point when I've spoken about Saturn previously. Saturn is at 0 degrees and 53 minutes, right? It recently went direct. Now, there's a book called Sabian Symbols. Some of you are aware of it. It's called the Astrological Mandala, the cycle of transformations, and it's 360 degrees symbolic phases by Dane Rudhyar. It's a fantastic book. Now, the degrees for Saturn at the moment that we would look to in this book is the 2nd degree of Pisces, because Saturn is in still. It's the 1st degree, actually. Just reading the 1st degree, just give me a minute. The 2nd degree was more appropriate, actually. I have to think about that, so I might just leave that on the side for a moment. Okay, so those are the highlights really for the present moment, and we are building up to this Venus in Libra passing over the South Node, then passing over the Venus Libra star point, which, as I said, I feel could be a helpful omen. It won't be, that everything will just, shift in that sort of one day, as it were, but she could be the very catalyst to establish something very significant for a very important change that would come through the archetype of Libra, which is ultimately about peace and fairness and justice and equality and the acceptance of diversity as well. It's an important key point that not many people would even be aware of, that Libra actually does connect to diversity. So let me see. I think I just want to quickly say something about Vesta in Cancer. Even though she appears to be sort of in a different land unto herself here, really. Well, she is, because She's in Cancer, so she's not really doing much. Let me see. Forming a sextile to Jupiter. Okay, that's pretty good. Doesn't aspect the Sagittarius planets and forms a trine to Saturn, actually. So that's quite interesting. She's already passed the trine to Saturn, though, because she's 5 and nearly 6 degrees. So she's already gone past that, actually. So I guess we'll leave that one. She's gone past it. The sextile, however, to Jupiter is applying. So she will get to forming a sextile to Jupiter soon enough. So it's an applying aspect. That one's more noteworthy of paying attention to. So what is Vesta all about? She's about a lot of different things, and she's without question one of the most complex, mystical, mysterious goddesses. However, to give her two very specific themes or meanings from the point of view of, let's say, the backdrop of everything that's going on. Vesta speaks to what we invest ourselves into. The word investment comes from the word Vesta herself. So Vesta will correlate to what we invest our time, energy, mind, heart, soul, everything, right? How we invest ourselves into something. Usually, however, it is also at the cost of everything else, because she will invoke us to focus on something to the exclusion of everything else. One of her key words is focus. And the reason the word focus is strongly associated with Vesta is precisely for the reason that I just said, which is that when she focuses on something, it is to the exclusion of everything else. She's a deep, deep, deep devotional goddess. Now, in the archetype of Cancer, relative to the backdrop of what's going on the earth plane, which has raised tremendous anxiety in a lot of people, if not the entire world, because this severe conflict that has been taking place, could very easily turn into an entire collective conflict. And I suppose that has entered everybody's mind at some point. And that's a very real possibility. So from that perspective, there's an underlying anxiety within everyone to some extent, some more than others. And Cancer, of course, speaks to the ability to have inner security. Now, what does that mean? True inner security is not based on anything external, very simply put. So the archetype of Cancer from an evolutionary level points to developing and sustaining and integrating such a deep level of security from within that no matter what goes on outside of yourself, your inner security sustains you. So for those reasons, given that these archetypes speak to these themes, that is Cancer and Vesta, I would say that Vesta moving through Cancer for the next couple of months is highlighting this very exact theme for us. It is a point that we can focus on, because Vesta is about focusing on that exact alignment and integration within ourselves in our own life. Because aside from this cataclysmic explosion happening in the Middle East, there are also many other matters going on the earth plane that are producing tremendous insecurity and fear and anxiety on a number of different levels, because the truth is the majority of people are just working to pay their bills. And everyone knows, and everyone is, you know, it's obviously it's there, it's happening, and that is that the cost of everything has doubled and in some cases tripled. However, the income that people receive outside of being, you know, some massive politician or some massive leader of some kind, or some big executive, or, you know, someone who has a lot of money in investments or has a big company and so forth. In other words, just, you know, the majority of people who are not in that position, their income has not increased, yet the cost of living has magnified in such a way that just sustaining the very primal basics of surviving, which is Taurus, is a bigger burden than it has ever been in our lifetime. I think we could all agree to that. So naturally, that's going to evoke some kind of anxiety. You know, if you can't pay your rent, if you can't pay your bills, you know, you can't buy food, and so on and so forth. These are very real experiences for a lot of people. And I'm not saying Vesta in Cancer is going to resolve that, but I am saying that at least at the moment, because we are in such severe transitional times, these matters will not be resolved in the very near future. They will be resolved at some point, but certainly not at the moment. At the moment, it's just crisis everywhere. And these sorts of passages can be looked at, you know, opportunities of teachings that can show us something that we can learn and work on within ourselves, right? So Vesta in Cancer, I feel, is an opportunity for all of us to work more deeply on our own inner security, regardless of what is appearing and disappearing externally on the earth, because everything that appears disappears at some point. Everything is transient and everything is impermanent. So the only certainty is actually change. And if we base our security on the material plane and on what's appearing externally, we will never, ever, ever have a deep inner sustainable level of security. Never. So yeah, Vesta in Cancer, an opportunity to consider some of those things, because at the moment we cannot change the prices of food or rent or petrol or anything like that. We cannot do that at the moment. So if we can't change what is producing insecurity from that external plane, then we must find another way to bring about some sense of security within us that is beyond the material plane and beyond the external. It is the internal, which is Cancer. So I think that's just an important passage, which, you know, a lot of people won't even notice that really, unless they pay attention to it. You know, as I said, Vesta is a very complex, mysterious goddess, and a lot of people won't even be aware of where she is or if she's activating something in their lives or their chart. You really need to bring some some focus there. That's that's the key word for Vesta, focus. So we can focus, in other words, on building a stronger sense of security from within ourselves, because the external is always subject to change. And at the moment, it's subject to severe cataclysmic change, which is not bringing security and stability. It's bringing the opposite, actually. So we must build those inner reserves, if you like, connecting to internal security, inner resources. External resources are great to cultivate and build and develop, but they can change at any given moment, out of your control. But your inner resources that you cultivate and develop, no one can ever touch them. No one can ever take them away from you, as it were. No one, nothing. That's why there's so much benefit and richness in developing inner security. And that's what I think Vesta can help us with in this process of the backdrop of these very difficult passages that are taking place at the moment. So anyway, that's really all I wanted to highlight for today. I will see you guys soon for the, gosh, that's so close. I might have to come back tomorrow for that, actually. Full moon in Gemini. Full moon in Gemini with all this business going on. Yeah, I already know what that's going to speak to, but I'll come back and share some ideas with you. Sending you all so much love and peace to all souls. Thanks and bye. And also, yes, sorry, I forgot. Always forget to mention my astrology classes. So yeah, astrology classes are open, and you can join in for all of them or one of them or a few of them. It's entirely up to you. Just reach out to me and let me know if you want some details. And just know that my classes are very unique in that I bring in a very eclectic approach through evolutionary, traditional, psychological, esoteric, mythological, Babylonian astrology. So for example, we've talked about the relationship between the soul and the personality in the birth chart. We've talked about the elements, the quadruplicities, the essential dignities and debilities, and we are halfway through the zodiac at the moment. And so there's a lot of material covered in all those classes so far. And just to give you an example, when I talk about a particular archetype, we talk about it from a traditional Babylonian esoteric evolutionary level, and we also look at the mythology associated to the particular archetype. Then we'll also explore certain birth charts, famous people, for example, that were born with the sun in that particular archetype, for instance. And so, in other words, if you do a class with me that's on Sagittarius or Virgo or whatever, you're not just going to get some basic, mainstream commercial astrology. Oh, Sagittarius is a fire sign ruled by Sag. It's all about positivity and it's all about expansion. That's that's like magazines on coffee tables. That's my work is very in depth. So just keep that in mind. And also, readings are open as well if you're interested. So let me know and I'll see you guys possibly tomorrow. And if you do like my work, once again, don't be shy and hit the super thanks or super like button. It does help me be able to continue in my work for the divine. Thanks so much, love. Bye.